And Sean Carney is here.
Okay, hold on.
All right, Sean, we ready?
Not quite. I'm just trying to get Sean Connie is here? I don't, are you here, Sean?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just don't see you. Chelsea Battinger, are you present?
Present.
Thank you.
Karen
Karen
You don't
Bizzano,
listen, do you?
is Karen Bizzano present? Karen Bizzano?
I don't see Karen Bizzano on the call at this time.
Okay, can you let me know, Sean, if she comes in, just,
I will, yeah.
all
I
right.
think, let's see, I'm just double checking the list here. I think we have,
Lindsay
one,
Yag, I think, is present.
Yes, present.
2,
Yeah.
3. It looks like we have everyone except for Karen Bizzano, I think, at this point in time.
Okay.
So, Nick, I think we do. I think we do have a quorum. I think we are ready to begin.
Sure.
So,
right.
whenever you're ready,
All right. Are we recording, Sean?
I'm going to start the recording right now.
Sean,
Yes.
before you start, I was just gonna give the zoning board a little bit of background so that they understand exactly what they're hearing tonight, as
You want
opposed
this,
to
Karen, I'm sorry.
what they heard before. Is that all right with you, John Mancini?
That's fine. Sorry. That's fine. Yes, Karen.
Okay, thanks. If you looked at your application materials, you'll see that this application was filed in 2018. And the new members of the board might wonder why we're just getting around to it. The answer is that the zoning board opened the public hearing on the application shortly after it was filed so that the application could be referred to the planning board for advisory development plan review. Then when the hearing opened, the first hearing was a hearing on the applicant's appeal of a determination by the zoning enforcement officer. The board did not hear the merits of the special use permit at that time. They only heard the appeal. They denied the appeal, and that denial was appealed to Superior Court. The case was resolved with a consent order and sent back to the zoning board. And it's been continued for a number of months since then. But because this is a new public hearing on the special use permit itself, we don't need to worry about having the same 5 people present who heard the original application. So you're going to treat this as if you're starting brand new all over again. That's it, Sean. John, you can take it away.
Sure. Sean, are you? Can we start, or do you need to? Do you need to
Well,
continue?
I think it's just a point of order. I think for Jeffrey Valencourt, because my understanding, I think, is that Nick Solitro has to recuse himself as
I
chair
do.
for this item. Okay.
I do.
Okay. So maybe with that, maybe we just hand it over to Jeff Valencourt if he wants to open up the public hearing.
Certainly. So we're opening up the public hearing for the application of GD Richmond Beaver River LLC on the special.
You need
Yes?
a motion to open the public hearing.
Can I have a motion, please, to open up the application of the GD Richmond Beaver River LLC for a special use permit?
John Carney, I'll make a motion. We open the meeting.
Chelsea Battinger, I second.
Okay, we have a motion.
Yeah, now you need to vote on it. You need to do that by roll call, since we're on Zoom and not in person, so that everybody knows what everyone is saying. I know you haven't done this before, Jeff. I'm sorry. It's a little bit more complicated when you're doing it on Zoom. You just
Well,
need to call out each zoning board member's name and see how they vote.
All right. Can I have a vote, please? And Sean Carney,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Aye.
I'm at a loss as to seeing who else is here.
Yeah, we have Daniel Justfer on the call.
Daniel says aye.
We
Go
have
ahead,
Lindsay
Sean.
and Jeff. We also have Lindsay Hannon on the phone call.
Lindsay?
Lindsay, aye.
And
The
Jeff,
ayes have it.
we also have yourself on the phone call.
Yes.
And I believe Karen Bozano, I think, is not on the teleconference tonight.
Okay, we have a motion to open up.
You already voted on it. The motion passed, so now you're going to hand it over to John Mancini, and he's going to put on his presentation.
Okay, John.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening. As was indicated by your solicitor, I represent the applicant and the owner this evening in respect to the property located at 172 Beaver River Road, Assessor's Plat 8E, Lot 12. The application before you is for a special use permit for a property that consists of approximately 41 acres. The goal of the special use permit is to permit the applicant and the owner to construct a solar array at the property, which would consist of about 7 acres for a total of energy output of 5.3 megawatts AC. The applicant has with it this evening several witnesses, all of which intend to testify with regards to the elements of your ordinance section or chapter 1834, which lays out the requirements for which the applicant has the burden to meet for the issuance of the special use permit. With that, and what I'd like to do is get right into our presentation so that we can move along. My first witness is Kevin Warren. He's a registered professional engineer, registered in the state of Rhode Island, has been involved in this project from the beginning, and is the project manager for Green Development. And he's actually with me in the conference room. So I'll have him walk through the property and the layout of the property. And then from Mr. Warren, we'll hear from Don Layton, who's the landscape architect, and we'll go through the landscaping component of the project as well. So unless there's no questions of me, Mr. Chairman, in regards to the actual legal petition before the board, I'll turn it over to Mr. Warren for his testimony.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to swear in the witness?
Mr. Moore, where is Mr. Moore though? I can't see him.
I'm right here. It should flip over to me. Kevin Moran with Green Development, a registered professional civil engineer.
Mr. Moore, raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know we submitted a lot of material in several binders that you probably have in front of you. What I'd like to do is if I could share the screen to bring up the PowerPoint that we provided in section 2. That's probably going to be the best thing to speak over as I kind of go through the project and describe it a little bit further. Let's see if I can do that now.
Is that an exhibit? This is Chelsea Batinger. Is that an exhibit, the PowerPoint?
Yes, it's the same as section 2 in the materials that we submitted to the Planning and Zoning Office.
So what I'd like to do at this point, Mr. Chairman, is just incorporate as an exhibit our application, which consists of 2 binders, and that will allow you to easily maneuver through the presentation. The 2 binders will be presented through our presentation by way of the PowerPoint that incorporates a lot of the same material. So as we go through it, we'll incorporate that as an exhibit. So I'd like the application to reflect as an exhibit the two binders, and for purposes of this evening, I'd also reflect that two of that binder be also admitted as an exhibit.
John, it's Karen Ellsworth. I think that's a good way to do it, as long as you make sure that before each exhibit that you're going to discuss, you identify what it is so that the zoning board members can find it in their materials and they don't get confused.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So
Could you make sure, you have to tell me on for the record what number exhibit it would be, okay? Just so in the future they have that. Is this going to be exhibit number 1, 2?
This will be it's exhibit, why don't we call it exhibit? Well, the two binders are exhibit 1, so we'll call this exhibit 1A, which is tab 2 of the binder that's identified as volume 1, and it's the PowerPoint presentation.
So, so with that, I'm going to use that as, let me see here. There we go. Just this next slide, the second slide, just represents the project team. You'll be hearing from many of the people on this list tonight, not all. John, and I think the town solicitor, Ms. Ellsworth, provided us kind of a recap, a summary. That was really the intent of the first several slides. Legal overview, detailing some of the history and what have you. But to get into sort of the meat of my presentation on the civil engineering side, the site side, just green development very quickly. We're founded in 2009. We're locally based, locally owned in Rhode Island. Currently employ about 75 people. We own and operate onshore renewable projects, both solar and wind in Rhode Island. We're a little bit unique. We don't just develop projects, but we build them, we own them, we operate them. And currently we have about 55 megawatts of operational projects in Rhode Island. But specific to this site, it's Plat A Lot 12. It's zone R3, and it's about 41.76 acres. It was surveyed by National Land Surveyors. Located east of Beaver River Road, north of Shannock Hill Road, and abuts the Beaver River on the east side. That makes up the boundary line along the east side of the site.
Again.
I'm going to flip through the plans. The wetlands on the site were flagged by Natural Resource Services, specifically Joe McHugh. I'm going to flip down to slide 10. Wetlands are along the eastern side. A little hard to see at this scale. There's existing farm fields that predominate most of the site in the area proposed for solar. The site is within the groundwater recharge and reservoir area. It's shown as this sort of blue and green hatched area with the site in yellow sort of in the center. This substation map essentially just shows the proximity of the site to the Kenyon substation. We took the substation location, drew a 2-mile radius, and it overlaps onto the site. Not the entirety of the site. That's been previously discussed and I think is ongoing discussion. But a portion of the site certainly is within it. A portion of the solar array is within it, and the interconnection location is within that 2-mile. The site's been predominantly used for agriculture, although there is an existing house very close to Beaver River Road on the west side, almost centered on the site, and an outbuilding. But it's predominantly been agricultural. Sweet corn's been planted there for many years by the Stamp family. It's been fallow since about 2018, simply because of the economy of farming and has made it prohibitive to do that at this point. So we entered into a lease, a long-term lease with the Stamp family, would enter into a long-term lease to operate a solar field on this property. It would remain owned by the Stamp family. We're not proposing to buy it, but again, just a little bit, about that. I mean, the Stamps have been farming Rhode Island for generations. This is just the boundary survey. It's kind of orientated a little bit differently. The east is the top of the page. This is the Beaver River Road to the west, and Shannakill to the south. The Stamp family also owns land on the opposite side of the road, although that's not part of this application. But they own additional land on the other side of Beaver River Road. Our proposal, as John mentioned, was for a 5.25 megawatt AC solar array. It's a ground-mounted solar system, very similar to others you've seen in Richmond and other areas of Rhode Island. The fenced area that we proposed here within this sort of hatched area where the solar panels run north-south, facing southern horizon. The fenced area would be about 18.7 acres. Earlier applications, when we started back in 2018, was actually a little bit larger. It was about 23 acres. Due to technology changes with respect to panels and efficiency, we've been able to sort of shrink the project from when we started in 2018. The panels themselves cover about 7.16 acres. That doesn't include the spacing between the rows or the space from the solar panels to the fence. But the actual coverage is about 7.16 acres. Again, that was reduced from about 9.9 acres back in 2018. We're not proposing any buildings. We're not proposing any lighting. Very little grading is being proposed on this site in terms of the topography. It's really just for some temporary sediment controls that we might need. Lends itself very well to basically building the solar on the existing addition over there. The point of interconnection is right here, and the access driveway coming into the site is at this point, so the southern 1/3 of the project, and there'd be pad mounted equipment from National Grid versus overhead utility lines. That's what we proposed here to minimize impacts visually, keep things low to the ground. And the access road for the solar project itself would run north-south along the western edge of the array. Again, earlier version of the plan had it on the other side towards the Beaver River, as well as the equipment. We tried to pull it further west when we resubmitted in January of this year to incorporate some of the feedback we did hear from the planning board during the DPR review process. The project conforms to the zoning setbacks in terms of front yard, side yard, rear yards. The yellow hatched area, one of our experts will talk about a little bit later. There was a historic study done. There was some areas identified with potentially some significance, and the idea was to essentially preserve that, pull the project out of that yellow area around the existing house, keep our limit of work out of there, fencing, and what have you, and landscape buffering, actually. So that idea is that yellow area is intended sort of as a preservation area with no activity proposed there. I talked about, the project, started, in 2018. The footprint was closer to what's shown in green, and we pulled it back to what's in black, further to the east, a little bit further from Beaver River where we could. So right now we're, 160 feet, give or take, from Beaver River Road to the nearest points of the solar project. There is Beaver River Road on the west. So we're 160 to 180 feet to the solar project. Yeah,
I'm
Don
sorry,
Layton, I think-
160 to 180 feet to the,
to the solar project. That doesn't include the landscape buffer. So, in the preservation area, this basically runs about 60 meters, 180 meters north of the house, 60 meters south of the house, and about 40 meters off the road. So that's what that yellow zone is designating, or that gold zone. These are just more detailed views of the project. Again, the property line up to the north is on the north top of the page. So this is sort of the northern third. Temporary drainage areas are outlined here, temporary sediment traps, basically. The fact that the property's been farmed, fallow field, or row crops, we're proposing to just put a permanent cover down around the panels between the rows. So, essentially the net effect is it improves a runoff condition versus those other uses, the row crops. We have exposed soil, potentially fallow soils over the winter that maybe has some sparse coverage of, winter cover, things like that. So the project didn't require any big detention ponds or infiltration areas. Depending on time of year, there's a significant landscape buffer, which Don will speak to, but depending on time of year, we could actually pre-plant that buffer, depending on time of year, at the early stage of the project versus at a later stage of the project. Again, that all depends on time of year and obviously if we're successful with this application. So again, the access road runs sort of north-south along the western edge of the array. There's a landscape buffer and then a buffer back to Beaver River Road. So the next view is sort of the next section further south. Again, the proposed access is here, south of the existing house. Pad mounted equipment, everything within the array would be underground as well. Underground wires, duct banks, things like that. The eastern side of the site I haven't talked too much about, but there's a wetland buffer, a vegetated wetland with a 50-foot perimeter wetland. There's also the Beaver River that has a 200-foot riverbank, and this is what this dashed line shows here. It's a much further setback than the wetland itself. Some of those areas are farmed today. They're part of their operation of the stamps have done, and it's allowed, and it would continue presumably otherwise. We're proposed a solar project outside of all those riverbank wetlands, perimeter wetlands, as part of this, this proposal. This project did go through Rhode Island DEM. I went through an application review by the Freshwater Wetlands Program, RIPTES program, and it did get an insignificant alteration permit as part of that process in 2019. And that is actually included as section 11 in our binder.
Show up here.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to call that an exhibit, John.
Yeah, let me answer that. Karen, I'd like to enter the DEM insignificant alteration permit. It's tab 11 in volume 1 binder. We'll just call that exhibit 2.
Oh, was that 1B or 2?
Well, I'm sorry, 1. Let's call it 1B.
And then this is just the southern edge of the project. Again, our hammerhead turnaround here at the end of the access road for the solar. They provide for the fire department a lockbox for them if they've had access inside. We've typically done a training as well with the local fire district, and certainly would propose.
Hey, Meg, do you know where the clicker is?
Who was that?
Whoever has their microphone on, please mute yourself.
It says Bill Stamp. I think a child just asked somebody where the clicker is.
I'm going to mute that individual.
It might be Mr. Stamp.
Yep, he's now muted.
Okay.
It wasn't us. So
Okay, it doesn't, all right, so it's someone else that might have had their mic on, I guess.
Yeah, just a quick reminder, everyone who's on the phone call, it would be really appreciated if everyone can just stay muted for obvious purposes. Thank you all.
So I think I've spoken to most of these items, in compliance with zoning, the height would be less than 12 feet. Typically, it's closer to 9 to 10 feet at the tallest point on the high side of the solar panels. We would have a 6-foot chain link fence, or as required by local jurisdiction, proposed 6 feet in this application. And we would raise the fence up, which is Rhode Island DEM's practice as well, just so the smaller wildlife could utilize that area and go in and out of the solar array unrestricted. So that's been a standard, I think, for quite a while with Rhode Island DEM and most of the solar projects we've seen. Again, electrical would be underground. There are some wildlife, some pollinator habitat areas incorporated in Beta's work. I'll let Don speak to that. And then I talked about the wetlands permit and pre-planting the buffer as a possibility, depending on time of year. This essentially is just the soil erosion plan phasing.
I'm sorry, this is essentially
The soil erosion and sediment control plan. It's part of the Rhode Island DEM approval. There are temporary sediment traps designated around on the low side of the solar array area during construction, just to catch sediments before the site's restabilized with grass. And this is a detail for what those would look like. Again, they are temporary. Once the site's stabilized, they're no longer needed and could be removed. And being sensitive to the agricultural soils and use, we are not proposing to remove any soil from the site. Anything that is disturbed, whether it be with trenching for underground or concrete pads, would remain on site. So those soils would remain. We'll talk briefly about National Grid and the offsite improvements. I think it's important and relevant to the discussion on this site in the area. So the area where we're connecting on Beaver River Road, there's no utility poles on the very southern end of Beaver River Road. It basically ends at the two houses, both on this site and across the street. This would interconnect back to Shannon Road, so there need to be a utility that's brought back in that direction. Go to this view. So this would be the southern limit of the project over here on Beaver River Road. And this view shows a continuation down to Shannakill and then back. So we proposed and was permitted with Rhode Island DEM is a duck bank, an underground duck bank within the road that would allow us to not have to cut trees to put in utility poles and wires on that southern limit of Beaver River Road. It's a nice canopy that hangs over the road. Beautiful, actually. And the idea is to not impact that. So we proposed underground to come all the way back to the utility pole on Shannakill. Again, the utility poles on Shannakill Road and before the intersection of Beaver River. So that gap we would propose underground to minimize or mitigate any impact with new utility lines, new overhead wires, things like that.
Kevin.
Yes.
Can you explain what underground duck bank is down Beaver Hill Road?
Sure. Yep. It would be, so instead of new wires to connect this project, it would be probably 2 to 4 pipes, depending on National Grid's final determination. One's usually the duct bank that the wires would be in, another would be a spare. And sometimes when you're building these, National Grid asks or requires you to put in sort of a redundancy. So it's 2 to 4 pipes, in all likelihood, buried 30 inches minimum below ground, encased in concrete. It's probably a trench that's about 24 inches wide. Got a detail on the plan. Can't read it. Bear with me 1 second. And there'd be several manholes, at least one at the intersection of Beaver River Road and Shannock Hill Road. Because they can't, bend the pipes, obviously, it'd be a manhole structure that would be buried in the road. I expect we'd probably be repaving most, if not all, of Beaver River Road at the end of that process. It's a fairly narrow road to begin with, and rather than patch it, we would normally, repave it in its entirety. Yeah, it's about a 24-inch wide duct bank is what we'd expect.
Can you turn the slide back one? You had it showing the roadway, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So that would,
There'd be
yep, go ahead.
a manhole proposed here, potentially one up near the project site before it goes into the site. And probably wouldn't need one coming off the utility pole. I believe it's utility pole 15 is the furthest one west road. I think again, the reason we propose that is to minimize impacts. There is some new equipment being added on the far other end of Shannock Hill Road. Some new poles here. Again, this is South County Trail on the bottom right corner of this page that I'm on. So again, this was all part of the DEM review process. We incorporated it so they could see what was happening. And I think there's some equipment they're putting on the pole at Route 138 South County Trail. That's just a change of some equipment that's already there on a pole. They have to swap it out. But just high level, that's sort of the off-site aspect of this. This is just a typical of what these look like. It's essentially a driven post or a screw in the ground that you attach the the structure that the panel's attached to. But usually these are single posts. It varies 15, 18, 20 feet that are driven into the ground. It's minimal impact. Right now this is sort of the equipment that we're expecting on this site at this point in time. It's a 5.25 megawatt AC project. It's about 6.5 megawatts DC, thereabouts. In terms of, just from a financial side, which isn't necessarily the purview of the zoning board, I understand that, but these are taxed by the state of Rhode Island based on legislation at $5,000 per megawatt. The project size remains what it's proposed as. It would be about $26,000 per year over 25 years. Looking at about $656,000 over a 25-year basis. I think the benefit of this project is solar is, after the life of the lease, it could return to farming at that point or some other use at that point in time. Too hard to predict what would happen in the future, but that was the benefit I think that we saw, and I'm sure Greg Waller, our archaeologist, will speak to it. But during the archaeological investigation, we did coordinate, and John Brown of the Narragansett Indian Tribe was on site during the investigation.
I'm sorry, John Brown from, excuse me, Mr. Moore, I'm
Narragansett.
sorry to interrupt. If you could just repeat where John Brown is from.
John Brown is with the Narragansett Indian Tribe.
Thank you.
We talked about the project, and that was one of the things that actually that he spoke to directly that he liked. Was it's a temporary use, it's a minimal disturbance, it's not roads, it's not foundations, it's not changing topography, and so he was on site while we did the archaeological investigation, and he and I had some conversation about it, as well as with our office in general. And I think of the uses that could happen, I think he was favorable to the idea of it being a solar project for that period of time, and then in the future, maybe it reverts back to agricultural or some other use, but that's too far to tell. If I didn't go too fast, this is just a high level summary. I think of a lot of the exhibits in the binder, whether it be stormwater management reports, class 1 surveys, soil erosion plans, things like that. This is the plan set really encompasses a lot of those items.
Just through the chair question, Mr. Moran, can you just go through a little bit the equipment on site, the location of the transformers and?
Yeah, I'm going to flip back. Sorry if this is flip back to this page. Again, an earlier version of this plan, again, during the planning process, planning board review, we did try to incorporate the feedback we did get. So originally the road was on the east side of the project. The equipment pads, the transformer, the inverters, which are shown as these sort of black boxes, were on the other side of the solar array. On the Beaver River side, the river itself, there was some concerns about the placement of that, access to it. So we moved the road to the west. We brought the equipment with it. It results in a little bit less gravel or stone access road as well. So there's a benefit from that standpoint. And it certainly is more accessible here. It's further from the river. We do have some notes in the plans referencing containment around these equipment pads, which we just did something very similar on a project in Hopkinton as part of the approval of that project. And it would be a similar containment system here for these areas. Sealed concrete pads with a containment around them. So it was similar in use.
Can you just describe for the board what the transformer, what essentially it is and how it operates?
Yeah, as best.
Yeah, to the best of your knowledge.
I mean, essentially, it's taking the DC output from the solar project and putting it into a form that it can transmit back to the national grid through their system in terms of stepping it to the right voltage. And I'm not an electrical engineering expert, but essentially, it's to condition that power so they can go back into national grid system at the levels that they need it at. Safely. This is extensively studied by National Grid. There's an impact study that's part of your record. It's one of the sections. Let me just find it.
Section 12.
Section 12 is the National Grid Impact Study, where they look at. It also went through an additional transmission study since then. But this is the one we get from National Grid, the impact study.
Can you describe for the board where the project is as far as National Grid interconnection approval and agreement?
Yeah, so we have a National Grid system impact study. It's going through a transmission study that took a significant amount of time. That was finished early part of this year, May, June timeframe. We requested from Grid the final ISA, the impact and interconnection services agreement, which essentially is their final approval. It binds them, it binds us. We have to pay, certain dollars at different stages of their design and construction process to go make these changes, design all the equipment to the nth degree, and put that into construction. So that's the next step. We do have a request to National Grid for that. That cannot, they can't do any work until we conclude this process with the town of Richmond, obviously. We do have a RIDEM freshwater wetlands permit, so that is in hand. But it's been extensively studied by National Grid over the last 2+ years.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the section 12, which is the National Grid System Impact Study, be deemed Exhibit 1C.
Okay.
I have nothing further of our project engineer. I'll reserve him. If the board has any questions or any members of the public have any questions, we'll make them readily available, of course. And with the board's permission, we'll move to Don Layton from Beta Engineering, who's our
So what's
landscape
Don's last name? Don Lee?
No, Layton.
I'm sorry?
I put it up on the slide for you. It's the
Thank you.
next slide.
Does anybody from the board have any questions for Don?
You mean any questions for Kevin?
I have a question. This is Daniel Jarster. Should I go ahead, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay. Of course, the materials that were given to the board, we've got a lot more data that I don't believe we'll be going over all of that at this time. One of the questions I had is the size of the project seems to be listed at various levels and different portions of the overall packet. I saw something at one point that was 7.5 or 6 something megawatts, and then now I think we're talking 5.4 or 6 now. So I'm curious, what is the actual size of the project?
I can answer that, and I can give it to Kevin. But the project, the actual size is 5.25, and Kevin will elaborate on that. It was reduced from an original size as originally petitioned. It has reduced in size both in AC wattage as well as acreage, and I'll have Kevin elaborate on that.
Yes, so it was studied by National Grid as 5.25 megawatts AC. So that is a limitation. If we were to change that, it would go back through those studies for 2 more years or another year. So that is that's a definite. It's connecting to their 12.47 kV line, I guess. The DC size, it changes a little bit just because the panels that we planned it for, there's a potential to reduce the project even a little bit further in terms of footprint, but still keep the size the same from a power standpoint. And the reason being is, panel technology changes. Just your iPhone is now, the newest ones are 11 or 12. I don't know what they are, but like the technology, panel technology has gotten better and better. So, for a little bit better panels available, potentially we could reduce the project a little bit, still keep it that 5.25 AC. Usually you want a 1.2 to 1.25 ratio of DC to AC. Right now we're right about that. We're I think like 1.26. There's potentially 500 watt plus panels available next year that, if we could use them on a project like this, we could maybe shrink the footprint a little bit more. So I hope that answers your question as to the size, though.
Yes, it answers that question. The other question I had, if I may, Mr. Chairman, this is Daniel again. The other question I had is there's a lengthy section of highly technical material from National Grid. And in reading through that, there's at one point, there's a table of cost. I think ultimately the final figure was like $1.3 million. I'm wanting to verify that cost is being borne by the installer with Green in this case.
Yes, that is a cost to us for the project. If there was another solar project proposed that would require similar improvements, there could be some cost sharing with that other project. But if not for that, it would be Green's, our responsibility, the project developer's responsibility.
John Mancini, can I interrupt your presentation for just 1 minute? Sean, you there?
I am.
I'm not sure whether it's possible for you to disable the chat feature, but if you can't, we should ask people not to use it during the public hearing. It's distracting and it would potentially introduce information that's not sworn testimony.
Yes, I can disable public chat.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, John.
I don't know if the board member has more questions.
The board doesn't have any more questions. John, did you have some more presentation?
Yes, so our next witness, and again, I'm reserving Mr. Moran to ask any questions that may pop up during continued hearing, but we'll have Don from Beta Engineering. I'll ask that he be sworn in.
Very good.
Hold on one second, please. I'm looking for Don. I don't even see him. Hold on one second. I'm still looking for Don. Sean, is there any way you can find Don for me and put him on my screen somehow? Not finding him.
Sure, let me see if
I
let me scroll.
I found him.
Okay.
There's so many people that I'm only, because I have a document on the screen, I can only see 4 people at a time, so.
The challenges of 54 people on the teleconference.
I know, and so now I can't see Mr. Mancini, but I can see Don, so let's try it from there. Okay, Mr. Mancini, this is Don. Oh, Mr. Layton, could you raise your right hand? You have. Thank you very much. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God, sir?
I do.
Please state your full name for the record for me.
Donald Layton.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, before Don starts, I just want to note the board to section 10 of of binder 1, volume 1, which is the landscape plans. And I ask that be moved as a full exhibit. We can call that exhibit CD, landscape plans.
What number, John?
It is section 12 of binder 1, and it'll be exhibit 1D, the landscape plans. Section 10. I'm sorry, section 10. Section 10 of our binder. And we
Mr.
also
Chairman.
have that as part of our PowerPoint, so I'll have Don proceed.
Mr. Chairman, is it necessary for a board member to move that as an exhibit, or is the one testifying able to do that?
Who is speaking?
That's Daniel.
What was that, Daniel?
I was asking, he was wanting that entered as an exhibit. Can he doing that just as one witness testifying, or does a board member need to vote on that to receive it as an exhibit?
No, the board members do not vote on receiving the exhibits.
Thank you.
They've already been pre-marked and pre-introduced, so you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
All right, John.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I'll have Don walk through the plans for the board.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Again, Don Layton with the Beta Group. I'm a landscape architect, senior vice president at Beta. And we were tasked with looking at this project and first looking at how it would impact any of the visual views from Beaver River Road. So the first thing that we did is obviously take a look at the existing conditions. I believe we submitted and Kevin, if you're running the show, I believe we submitted a visual analysis of the road. Here it is with 10 photographs that we've documented on the plan. So in the bottom right of this screen, you can see the photographs that were taken 1 through 10, going from the south to the north and always looking over in the easterly, northeasterly direction. And if you scan through the photos, you can obviously see that it's mostly an open field, starting with the photo in number 1. That field is a rather healthy field. The growth was measuring 6 to 7 feet, almost right out to the road. And as we move up the roadway, there becomes other elements along the road that gives it its character, the trees on both sides of the road, but obviously we're concerned with the east side of the road as we move up. We get to the middle of the site and there's the house and larger trees that would all be preserved under the plan that we currently are presenting. You can see the rooftop of the house in photo number 5, very large white pines directly behind that house. They would all remain with the plan that we're presenting. As we continue up the road, photo 6 shows how close that house is to the roadway. It would also remain. This is the beginning of the preservation area that Kevin spoke of, and others will speak of it as well. This area to the north on the east side of the road is very sensitive. All of this would remain as we continue north along this roadway. We get into a little bit of vegetation that's directly across from another home that's on the west side of the road. This vegetation would remain as is. And as we round up to the very, very north end, you can see the open field again. And the hedge line in the back is essentially the property line, the northern property line. I think there's one more shot. Number 10, do we have number 10? No, we skipped over number 10. But essentially it's an open field with that vegetation remaining that you see right next to the road. So as Kevin mentioned, the project has shrunk, and as it has shrunk, it's made our job easier in terms of what we were proposing in terms of screening the solar arrays from the roadway. So in this particular frame, you can see a cross section with Beaver River Road and the red pickup coming right at us, with a scaled section of how far back we are setting the arrays. We essentially have an 138-foot setback before we even create a new vegetated buffer that you can see on this diagram. And then there's an additional 15 feet before the solar arrays. These cross sections, there's 3 of them here on this screen. These cross sections are taking through the site. The lower cross section is the southerly portion of the site. The middle cross section with the yellow preservation area is obviously through the middle in that zone that we've deemed as a sort of a no-touch zone. And you can see it goes right through the house that's so close to Beaver River Road. Those large pine trees directly behind the house, all of that would remain as is. And then the very top section is that open field area, but with the vegetation that I mentioned would remain directly across from the abutting neighbor's house on the west side of Beaver River Road. In all of those sections, I just want to point out again the 138-foot setback before the landscape buffer, which is 25 feet in width in itself, is created. The 138-foot setback could be the existing field conditions. And as I said right off the bat, they're conditions that have a growth of about 6 to 7 feet. This is something, though, that we could consider as a pollinator field. Kevin did mention that. That's part of the landscape plans, is that when we have open field opportunities, we're looking for a pollinator mix that certainly supports the bees, the butterflies, the birds. And that is something that we could be considering also for the 138-foot field condition that currently exists. We certainly would be using that same mix within the solar array fields. Once the installation is done, that pollinator mix is used quite a bit within the field area. And I think, Kevin, there's also an, oh, there we go. This is a pretty important plan. It's a lot of the same information. It is the same information that Kevin was presenting, but in color, you can see a little more of the existing conditions and how that buffer, that 138-foot buffer, would be so important along the east side of Beaver River Road. It certainly contains the preservation area, which we would not touch at all. That dark green band is the landscape buffer, the 25-foot buffer, and it actually sits to the east side of the preservation area, so we're not even digging into that to create that buffer. I think the only break within that landscape buffer is the access road that Kevin pointed out that would allow vehicles into the site, but then it would be behind this landscape buffer. The landscape buffer is part of the plan that introduces native plant material, both evergreens and deciduous shrubs. And a lot of it is selected to first be deer resistant, but also to be native in terms of giving back to the habitat, the surrounding habitat that's within this area. And Kevin, I think I've gone through most of that. And there's just a plate that shows the typical plant material that we will plant in different clusters and waves of plant material. And again, the evergreens would be both spruce and cedar, deer resistant, and combined with witch hazel, winterberry, red twig dogwood. That's the usual palette that we would use in the southern portion of Rhode Island.
Go back to
That, these are typical planting plans, but that you can see the extent of that plant material as it wraps around the east side of that 138-foot setback. And it continues up the road. The teal square is the existing building that would remain, and that large puff of cloud behind it is the white pines that would also remain, all within that 138-foot buffer. And then you can see the continuation of the landscape buffer as it goes to the northern property line. And that is the overview of the landscape plan.
Point where does any of the public have some?
Is this an open forum where citizens can contribute to this
It
conversation?
is not an open forum. No, it is not. There'll
Thank
be an opportunity for members of the public to speak when the applicant has finished with his presentation, but no one should speak during the presentation. And
Thank you.
when you do speak, you'll have to be sworn in as a witness.
Thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair, Don, on this slide that you have here, can you just also walk us through the buffer that's between the buffer towards the wetlands, where it says existing wetlands? What's there now and how that intends to remain essentially as is?
Yes, so the river is in the dark blue with its buffer located in the teal color. So those are all the flagged wetlands. And then there is a buffer setback from the edge of wetlands. So if you were just making a rough guesstimate, if we look at each of those section lines and we understand that there's 138 feet between the roadway and the proposed landscape buffer, you can see that on the east side of the solar arrays, where, especially in the northern portion, we're going to be exceeding that to maybe 150, 180 feet. Right in the middle, you can see where you're probably down to about 80 or 90 feet between the actual wetland buffer and where the solar array is proposed. And then on the very southern end, we didn't talk about this, but there is an open field that's part of this property and would remain as an open field. So that whole southern end is probably about a 2.5 acre, 3 acre field that remains open as well, and is part of that buffer from the river.
So Don, in your opinion, based on the buffer presented on Beaver River Road and the plantings proposed, as well as the maintenance of the existing vegetation, would you be able to visually see this project as you drive down Beaver River Road?
You would not. You would be hard pressed to see it if it were magically dropped in there today. At least in the summertime, the vegetation is so high that you would probably not see it with the existing vegetation. With the new planted buffer, you will not be able to see it. 138 feet back is a sizable distance, plus the 25 feet of landscape buffer, plus another 15 feet between the fence and the actual panel. So, you know, that's close to 180 feet between the roadway edge and the panels. And then as the project moves to the east, the topography drops down into the river valley. So the terrain allows the project to drop away from the road corridor in the visual access to it. It drops away from it. So you would probably not see this project. You might have a peek at it through the access road, but that would maybe be the only place.
And one final question through the chair. Based on the buffer as you presented and as you discussed, in your professional opinion, would the installation of the solar panels alter the general character of that surrounding area?
Given what Kevin Moran said about the intent of these solar panels, where they are driven into the terrain and after a 25-year lease is up, can actually be removed, the landscape would be virtually untouched. What you would be left with is a mature buffer of native plant material that would parallel the road.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions of our landscape architect. Again, like Mr. Moran, I'll reserve him for discussion with the public or any questions that the board members may have.
Thank you. Any of the members have some questions for Don?
Yes, this is Chelsea Batinger. I have a question on what the height of the buffer is going to be, and how long is it going to take to get to the maximum height?
So the buffer, the 25-foot buffer is first planted on a slight berm. So the berm rises up 5 feet over that 25-foot width. The plant material, and I have the planting schedule in front of me, starting with the larger plants, the red cedars and the blue spruce are planted at a 6 to 7 foot height. So they're on top of a 5 foot berm. So we're looking at an 11 to 12 foot height when planted. I don't know if that completely answers the question, but that's the intent.
And how long or how tall do they grow, and how long does it take to get to their maximum height?
Well, we would look at like a 10-year growth habit with the junipers probably reaching 25 foot height, and the blue spruce reaching more of a 30, 35 foot height within a 10-year period. And the other part of the landscape plan that's very important, and Kevin can elaborate on this with other projects that Green Development has done, but they're planted with a maintenance plan. So if plants were to die, they would be replaced. And that's common with all the developments with Green Development, where the screening and the landscape buffer is so critical.
Don, I have a question for you. This is Jeff. So we have a chain link fence that runs all around the proposed solar array.
Yes.
And the vegetation buffer is on the Beaver River Road side.
That is correct.
And there is no vegetation buffer proposed in the rear area or around any of the other area of this for some reason? Can you explain why?
Well, the buffer was essentially for a visual access to the solar arrays. So on the southern end, on the screen that's still up, on the southern end, we did extend the buffer past the chain link fence, so that when you are heading south to north, you would not look into the very southern tip of this project. On the northern end, there already exists a hedgerow that we were certainly not going to impact. We did extend the buffer right to the property line. So there's probably an additional 50 feet of planting to the very north end. To the backside, I should say to the east side, there's an extensive buffer that runs down into the river corridor. And so we did not do any buffer planting back there. The thought is that any disturbed soil, which would really be within the solar array area, would be planted with the pollinator field mix.
You're on mute, Jeff.
Here we go. Thank you. So I can see the, the public view from the Beaver River Road situation, and I'm wondering about the actual, not sure about the river and whatnot, and the public that travels down the river, kayaking, fishing, so forth and so on. So I was wondering if that was taken into consideration for that viewing, shielding as much as off of Beaver River Road driving.
It was not in the plan that's before us. We were essentially relying on the distance and the existing vegetation that's along the edge of the open field for the buffer.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the
Yeah,
board?
Chelsea Batinger. The house across the street, well, if they, I think it's a 2-level house. If they're on the second floor of their house, will they be able to see the solar panels?
They might at the initial planting of the landscape buffer. They would have a difficult time in the summertime because there is a large grove of existing deciduous material directly across from the house. But in the wintertime, that would lose its leaves, and the evergreen plantings within the landscape buffer would eventually remove any view even from their second floor. But it would not be at the time of planting. It would be after that 10-year period I was talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I had one question that was presented about the existing house that was there, and I don't know if that's in your purview, Don, or if it's in John's, but the existing house that's gonna remain, is that gonna be occupied?
That is a question that I'll throw it right back to John and Kevin, because that's a very good question.
Yeah,
I'll refer that to Kevin.
okay. Kevin Moran again. Yeah, the initial proposal was we were going to demo the house, but as we got through the historical archaeological aspect, you know, it's not certain what exact value that house has, but the idea was to preserve it. The occupied use in all likelihood would not continue, but the structure would remain. It could have some ancillary, just, you know, we need telecommunication, Cox cable or Verizon line, and potentially it could serve some purpose as far as supporting the solar in that fashion, but that would be the extent of it.
All right, all right. Sorry, I was muted again. So what you're saying is that you're gonna retain the house structure. You're not gonna have a occupant within it living there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, if no further questions, then I'd like to move to our archaeological study.
Okay, sounds good.
No, this is for the whoever was talking.
Hello?
Craig, while we're here,
Craig, can you just be, I'd ask that Craig Waller be sworn in.
So I can't see the witness at all. Let me see if I can, hold on. Trying to find him if I can find him. Wow, this is not easy. Ooh. There you are, yay, okay. Thank you, sir. Raise your right hand again, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name for the record.
Greg Walwer.
Thank you. You put your hand down, thanks.
And Mr. Chairman, before Greg starts, I just want to enter as our exhibit section 22 of volume 1 of binder 1, and that is the archaeological survey. And so I just asked that be identified as exhibit 1E, but it's tab 22 in your binder.
Hey, thank
so
you.
With that, thank you. So with that, I'll have Greg walk through the report that he's presented and prepared for this project.
Thank you. Again, name is Greg Waller of ACS. I'm the Director of Archaeological Consulting Services. And we conducted a phase 1 intensive survey in July of 2019. We operated under a permit from the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission. They had advised the town that a survey should be done in anticipation of the project for both prehistoric and historic cultural resources. The survey included background research, a surface survey, and a number of subsurface shovel tests. And we were operating under monitoring by the Narragansett Tribal Historic Preservation Office. As Kevin indicated, they did express favorability for the project, both before and after our survey work. We subjected the project to our landscape sensitivity analysis, which indicated a moderate sensitivity for prehistoric resources. The favorable aspects include proximity to the river, but the predominant soil type is a silt loam, which doesn't drain extremely fast. So that was a limiting factor, which would probably preclude large village sites from being present. Local informants had indicated that the property had been surface collected over the years, and a number of projectile points had been recovered by amateur archaeologists.
A number of, I'm sorry, repeat that, a number of.
Non-professional archaeologists had reported discovering projectile points over the years by walking the fields. So we had that as background information that there could be, in fact, a site present. Our research of land records indicated that this was part of the Jeremiah Northup farm since around 1800, when the house across the street was built. With that house, over the years, a number of outbuildings were also built on both sides of the road. And there are a number of those that are still present on the west side of the road. On the east side of the road, as already discussed, there's the remains of a house, or an existing house, that was reportedly converted from a mill structure in the 1930s, although that's not been independently confirmed or established. Now, the Jamesford House, as it's known across the street, is part of an informally established historic district called the Beaver River Road Historic District, or Agricultural District. And it's part of a number of several farmsteads up and down the road, which are proposed as eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, but that designation has never been formally established. Various historic maps through time show a number of outbuildings on either side of the road at various locations through time, but always very tightly clustered to the road. So for our survey work, we did a stratified systematic testing program, which placed tests in 15-meter intervals, which is standard for the industry. As you can see from the red circles on the graphic before you, you'll notice that we loaded up tests within within 45 meters of the road, which is a historic route through the town, and also a similar distance to the eastern edge of the project area closest to the river. So essentially the western tests would be searching for historic remains, and the tests along the river most likely to record traces of prehistoric activity. There were 211 tests placed at standard 15-meter intervals. The tests measure 1/2 meter across and variable depths, but usually on the order of about 1 meter deep. There were also 12 judgmental tests placed at 3 locations where we had recovered prehistoric projectile points. And those on the map are shown where there are green fill in the red circles at 3 different locations. None of those tests revealed further traces of prehistoric activity. So we had made a determination that what this likely represents is a hunting ground, given the presence of projectile points, but surprisingly to the exclusion of anything else. No bone, no ceramic, no groundstone materials, nothing that would suggest a more intensively occupied setting. All the points were broken, and they were all recovered within the plow zone context. So keep in mind that the upper 10 inches or 25 centimeters of soil has been repeatedly plowed through time, as we were able to discern from our stratigraphic profiles of shovel tests. Regarding historic materials, within the black box that you see on the western edge of the project area, we did find a high density of historic material, mostly structural and domestic refuse from the 19th century, and these are predominantly related to the use of outbuildings with the whole agricultural complex that was formerly included the house on the west side of the street and its outbuildings. So, and not only artifacts related to the use of the area, but also traces of foundations of the associated outbuildings. And from the historic records of our background research, we were able to determine that there was quite a few agricultural uses of the property that evolved through time, ranging from crops to dairy to potatoes, and more recently corn, as you heard. So there's an evolving agricultural shift through time that these buildings could impart more information on, as well as the associated artifacts. Given that, we made a series of recommendations for these findings. Within the open black box, we recommended that at least the subsurface context below depth of the plow zone, or 25 centimeters below the surface, be either further conserved. 25 centimeters down is where you find intact soils that weren't subjected to repeated plowing through time. So that's where you would have intact archaeological remains, whereas everything above that has been mixed and churned through decades, if not hundreds of years of plowing. So our recommendation is at least the subsurface context below the plow zone be further conserved. And that conservation can look like a number of things. You can either preserve it in place, or you can subject it to further levels of investigation, which in this case would be a phase 2 site examination. And in that process, you're in a more refined way delimiting the vertical and horizontal extents of the site. You're evaluating its integrity, its chronological setting, its functional setting, and ultimately its potential eligibility for the National Register of Historic Places. I believe in this case, the proponents choose to just preserve it in place, which is an equally acceptable option. And we have issued a letter to that effect from the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission, which oversees our work. Our recommendations are made in an effort to create a balance between the importance for conserving cultural resources and the nature of the development, which in this case can quite easily accommodate the conservation of that resource. And I think that covers pretty much what we had found and recommended, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Any of the board members have any questions for Greg?
I'm Carney, I'm good.
All right. No questions, Greg. You're off the hook.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call now Tom Sweeney, who's our real estate expert. He did provide a report, which is section 24, found in volume 2, so the second binder, and I'll offer that as an exhibit, which would be exhibit 1F, and ask that Mr. Sweeney be sworn in.
Let me find it. Could you take that paper down for a second, John, if you don't mind, just so I can see Mr. Sweeney and swear him in?
That's it. Okay.
Thanks. Hold on. Are you here, Mr. Sweeney? Where are you?
Right here.
Thank you. This is not easy, I have to tell you. 55 people on the screen. Okay. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name for the record.
Thomas, middle initial O, Sweeney, Sweeny.
Okay.
All right, John.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney, you were asked to prepare a report in regards to the site and whether the solar project would have any negative impact to the surrounding area and whether the same would be consistent with the surrounding area. Can you give us your findings and walk us through your written report?
Yes, I can. At your request, Mr. Mancini, I've inspected the area where the property is located along Beaver River Road, just north of Shannock Hill Road. The area is comprised predominantly of open farm fields with some unimproved properties and residential properties to the east of the property on the other side of the Beaver River, and then interspersed farmland and residential throughout. I've driven the neighborhood, looked at the property. In addition, and in the report submitted to the board, at the time that report was completed, I had surveyed a number of studies that have been done to indicate the impact of solar arrays on residential properties. At that point, none of the studies had been Rhode Island or Massachusetts based, but all of the studies which I've referenced by website addresses and have included, I believe, in the package that was submitted to the board. Those studies essentially, based upon paired sales analysis, have determined that with the proper screening, similar to what is proposed for this project, solar arrays do not have negative impact on residential property values. Subsequent to the submission of this report, Dr. Corey Lang in late September, early October, had a webinar and then published his paper specifically on the impact of solar arrays on real estate residential property values in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. It's a very thorough study. I will say that I not only listened to the webinar and reviewed the report, but also took the opportunity to reach out and did subsequently talk to Dr. Lang regarding the report. In the grand scheme of things with this project, I will note that the report is very specific, that it does state that there is, and I can quote, little or no impact on rural property values from solar arrays. The study lists its baseline as between rural and non-rural properties. On non-rural properties, there's indicated impacts. On rural properties, rural areas, those areas or towns that have populations less than 850 people per square mile is how they define rural. And in this case, the town of Richmond has a population base of 190 people per square mile. So it would definitely be considered a rural community. And based upon Dr. Lang's findings, there is no negative impact or insignificant impact of solar arrays on residential properties. Based upon all of that, the studies from out of the area and this specific study, it's my conclusion that the proposed development especially with the proposed screening along Beaver River Road and in other areas, will not have any negative impact on surrounding property values.
And Mr. Sweeney, is it also your testimony and your professional opinion that the proposed use would not alter the general character of the surrounding area? Or
it is my, okay. Sorry, Mr. Mancini. Yes, it is my opinion. The way this is buffered on the open farmland, as Mr. Lighton has testified to, you won't be able to see it. It's a non-intrusive, it makes no noise. You won't be able to see it. In my opinion, it will be consistent with uses in the area.
In your opinion, would you classify this as a temporary use, given the fact that the property is only leased for 25 years with a decommissioning bond being proposed?
Yes, I believe it's a way for the owner of the property to generate some income on the property while farming is not economically feasible. The fact that this in 25 years, the array can be removed and it can be redeveloped at that point, either as farmland or some other permitted use, is definitely to an extent of temporary use.
Okay. I have nothing further, Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions for Mr. Sweeney? All right, not at this time.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, our last witness is Ed Pimentel. He did submit a report. It is section 21 of our binder. Unfortunately, Mr. Pimentel is not available this evening as a result of a family emergency. So I asked the chairman that you allow us an opportunity to present him at the next meeting to conclude that report and to essentially conclude our presentation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I am amendable to yielding to the board for any further questions the board have, or for the board to open up for public hearing to hear any comments that the general public may have in reference to the witnesses that we have presented this evening.
All right, very good. Any board members have any more questions? Excellent. All right. So I guess at this point, the town, did we have anybody else that was going to present?
No, I think the only other party that's going to present testimony is the town.
All right.
You can
There's
ask
the town,
Mike Cozzolino if he wants to proceed now or whether he wants to wait until after Mr. Mancini has finished his case.
Yeah.
I'd probably prefer to wait until he completed, then I would respond in total to all of his presentation.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that if the town has any exhibits, that the applicant be entitled to see those exhibits before Mr. Cozzolino proceeds.
They're already posted online, John. They're on ClerkBase.
And they're already incorporated?
Yep. Jeff?
Yes.
My suggestion would be that you not ask for public comment until after both John has finished putting on his case and the town has finished putting on its case. Because if you allow public comment, now you're going to get public comment on an incomplete case.
I understand. John sounds like he's finished at the moment.
Yeah, he's going to have Ed Pimentel come and testify, I think, at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Right. So I would respectfully request a continuance to allow us to complete at the next meeting. That would also allow the board members an opportunity to take into account our oral testimony in the event they should have any more questions at the next meeting, and we can conclude with Mr. Pimentel's report and testimony.
All right. So at this point, I can request a motion to
continue to a date certain.
Yeah, continue to our next board meeting.
And so it's going to be up to you, members of the board, to decide whether you want to meet before Christmas or after Christmas, or whether you want to wait until January. Your regular meeting would be on the 28th, Monday, the 28th. In past years, the zoning board has conducted its regular December meeting on the third Monday instead of the fourth Monday. That would be the 21st. Some board members might have a preference about whether they would rather meet on the 21st or the 28th, or not at all in December. So maybe you should just have a discussion among the zoning board members about that.
What do you think, guys?
This is Chelsea Batinger. I don't have a preference, whatever date works for everybody else. In
And,
December.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, we're fine in meeting in January if the board so pleases.
John, would you be available on those third and fourth Mondays in December?
I'd be available on the 21st. We're not available on the 28th.
Okay, well, that eliminates that one then.
This is Daniel Jarsper, and I would be available on the 28th, but not the 21st. So I could probably adjust to be available on the 21st if that's what the majority desires.
This is Lindsay Hannon, and I'm free both days. Both days work fine for me.
Yeah, I'm fine also, especially with the Zoom. So I'm available
So
on the 21st.
you're going to need Sean also. Is Sean going to be available on the 21st?
Aaron, this is Sean. I can do the 21st. The 28th will take a little juggling, but if that's the date, I will certainly make myself available.
Yeah, John Mancini, I think, has already said that he's not available on the 28th, so we can't go without him. So it's going to have to be either the 21st of December or the January meeting.
I'll be available for both.
This is John Lacy. I just wanted to mention to the zoning board that the January meeting would be held on Monday, January 25th.
I make a motion to continue this till December 21st.
Are we going to be sure that Daniel's going to be available? Because if Daniel is not going to be available, you won't be able to go forward with it because you need all 5 members.
I can be available. I'll be in Maine, but I'll have ability to connect by Zoom.
Zoom goes all the way to Maine too.
Yeah, I think so. As long as I got a good connection up there.
Okay. Yeah, then go ahead, Jeff. You can have somebody make a motion to continue to Monday, December 21st.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. This is Daniel.
Second?
Chelsea Batinger, I second.
Okay, so it's approved.
So
All in favor?
Yeah, you got to take a roll call. Sorry, Jeff.
Yep. No problem. I'm getting it. So we have Daniel and Chelsea seconded, and do we have Sean?
He must be the new president.
John Carney, yes.
And Lindsay?
Lindsay Hannon, yes.
Did I get everyone
Yep,
present?
except for yourself.
Wonderful. I approve.
Okay.
Yes.
So you just want to tell the members of the audience that the public hearing on this application is going to resume on Monday, December 21st at 7 p.m.
On December 21st at 7 p.m., we will be continuing this meeting.
Excellent. Now, don't adjourn yet because you skipped right over the agenda item on the Walloam application. And you need to continue that one to a date certain so that the applicant doesn't have to re-notify all the abutters.
And for a date certain, what would that be, Karen?
That would either be December 21st or January 25th.
Jeff, this is Sean Carney. I'd like to make a motion that we postpone or continue the Walloam continuance until January 25th.
Good idea.
This is Chelsea Batinger, I second.
December 21st or 25th.
25th. So thank you, Sean. So that all in favor?
Daniel says aye.
That one guy couldn't be here for the lawyer.
Jeff Valencourt, aye.
The whole fucking case is presented. We have to wait
Excuse
another.
me, excuse me.
Mr. Kim Bassinet, if you could please mute yourself.
Please mute yourself, Mr. Bassinet. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I go back to the vote because I didn't get all of it. So I have Mr. Jasper saying aye. And then I heard one guy couldn't be here. That wasn't part of what we were supposed to hear. Okay. Okay, so I have Chelsea seconding it, and then I have, thank you, Sean, so that's all in favor. Then I have Mr. Jasper saying aye, but I don't have anybody after that.
Lindsay
Lindsay?
Hannon, aye.
Jeff Valencourt, aye.
Sean Carney, aye.
So we will be moving the application for the Wallem Reserve for January 25th.
Good.
21st. Or, excuse me, 25th, you're right.
Yep. Okay, Karen.
Okay, now you can adjourn. Unless you have
Jeff,
minutes. I
Jeff,
don't
Sean
remember.
Carney here real quick. We are going to meet again for Beaver River on December 21.
Correct,
Correct.
And then Wallaloma on January 25.
correct.
Okay, just to be clear for everybody, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That's a good idea.
Mr. Vice Chair, there are approval of minutes for October 26, 2020 that are on the agenda.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Daniel Jarster. I move the minutes from October 26.
Do we have a second?
I'll second Sean Carney.
Do we have approved?
Chelsea
Lindsay?
Baker, aye.
Sean Carney, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, aye.
All right, so the minutes,
Mr. Valencourt, you didn't vote.
oh, aye.
Thank you.
So minutes approved.
Thank you.
Were those the only minutes, Sean?
That was all we had.
Okay. Then you're all set.
All right, so we move to adjourn the meeting.
Yep.
Second,
All in favor?
Chelsea Baker, aye.
Sean
Daniel Jarster, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, aye.
Jeff Valencourt, aye. Sean?
yes, aye. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Good
Happy
job, guys.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, same to you guys.